Someone You Should Know. A program about people you know and even more that you don't. Hosted by Stuart Sax, veteran, husband, father, and grandfather. Now, here's your host, Stuart Sax.
Well, hello, welcome to another edition of Someone You Should Know. I am joined today by Joan Posivy, and we're going to be talking about something that you probably are very, very aware of, but you may not really totally be aware of it. So with that, and having said that, we are going to be brought to you today by our good friend, Irving Chung, who is a franchise specialist. Now, you have talked, we've talked about Irving many, many times. It's a brand new year now. Maybe this is the year that you might want to branch out, and it's a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today, that maybe you're looking at maybe a little side gig to make a little extra money, and maybe it's a franchise that you're looking into. It may surprise you that you don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get into franchising. There are some extremely affordable full-time and part-time franchises available out there. Reach out to Irving Chung, the franchise specialist. He'll have a little bit of a conversation with you, find out what your wants and needs are, and hey, maybe franchising is what it's all about for you. Because Joan is no stranger to a side gig, a side hustle. We were talking just before the show, when I was growing up, we used to have a paper route, or my buddies and I would cut grass in the summer and we'd shovel snow in the winter to earn a little bit of spending money, maybe put gas in the car. We never called that a side hustle. Today it's got a formal name. And Joan knows all about side hustles. And so I wanted to invite her to come onto the show and just talk with us a little bit about what it is and how she got into the business of side hustling. So welcome. Tell us a little bit about you, Joan.
Thanks so much, Stuart. It's great to be here. And I was laughing when you were talking about just the difference in what it's called today. I've certainly found that over the years. I remember when I first heard the word blog and I went, well, what is that? And I looked into it and it's like, isn't that an article? Are you just writing an article? Or there was another one. But yeah, a number of times like that. Side hustles, wow. That probably started around the time that I was in my first career, actually was as a banker. But please don't hold that against me. And it was actually during that time that I was about 18 years old. And friends of mine said, Joan, there's a seminar occurring in town. You should go. Now, they told me it was on business matters, predominantly marketing, something that I was interested in. So I went. Well, you can imagine my surprise, Stuart, when it turned out that the guy wasn't talking about marketing at all. It turns out he was talking about your mind and your potential. And this guy went on for like 2 hours, and I sat there mesmerized. It was the Hilton, Toronto, Canada. This big ballroom. I was like 3 rows back, 2 seats in. And he talked about your mind and your potential. He said, it doesn't matter what's happened to you in the past or really where you are now. It's where you're going. And he said, anyone can have, do, or be anything that they want seriously in their life. That was shocking for me because up until that time, most of my learning had been, different typical school subjects, science, history, math. I had never had anybody talk to me about my mind and my potential. And he said, and the other thing was too, I thought up until then that when you were born, you were dealt certain cards, so to speak, from the big deck. And those are the ones that you had to play. And I found out that's really not true. You can keep the ones that are helpful or supportive, ditch the others and pick up new ones. But at any rate, what ended up happening, I was just so intrigued with this information that went down really that career path simultaneously to other business ventures. Because as the personal development side started, I got more and more involved in that. And so one of the goals that I set was to become a bank manager. And I thought, wow, if I achieved that, like my life would be made. What more could I possibly want? And
is your family in the banking business?
Not at all. I love numbers. I still do. I love the number crunching side of things. Yeah, I'm one of those odd people that actually like, what's that?
Especially addition.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, without a calculator, I can do it too. And but worked at that for a couple of years and thought, you know what, that this isn't it. I thought that was it, and it wasn't. And so ended up going into the personal development space as a speaker and trainer and author. And the main reason I had the businesses on the side, and some of them became full-time, and some of them side hustles, is that I never wanted to be a speaker that just talked about stuff, but actually did it and had like a sandbox and a playground. So out of that sprouted side hustles. Sometimes those went full-time, sometimes not.
So, I mean, you're young, you go to the seminar and
Yep.
okay, so something snaps, but my gosh, the whole world of careers is out there. And why the financial industry? I mean, people say, I want to be a botanist, I want to be an anthropologist, I want to be a scientist, I want to do something exciting. And you say, I want to be a banker.
Yeah, that's true. I'm shaking my head now. But looking back, I do recall like more back in grade school of, oh, I want to be a veterinarian or I want to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
But you know how you mentioned you had like a paper route or shoveling snow? I mean, I was that person as well. And I always liked the feeling of having a few bucks in my pocket, because to me, that spelled independence, that it was my money. I could do with it what I wanted. Of course, my parents thought differently, but at any rate, that was my perception. And so I was always working part-time since I can remember. Like literally, it started with a paper route, I think, when I was 10 years old. And as far as the banking, I started as a part-time teller at the age of 16. And so I was doing that as I was going through high school. And I found that it was actually my work at the bank that was helping me more with my math at school than the other way around.
Interesting.
And so by the time, and back then, I'm dating myself, in Ontario, Canada, I'm in the West Coast now, we had grade 13. And I remember out of 6 subjects for me, 4 of those were math, going back to the math thing again. And I was getting promoted through the financial institution. I was a supervisor at the age, I think, 17. And so that was like, I'm too impatient to sit there and post education. I just want to stick with this and pursue it. So that's kind of how it happened. And I loved like I said, the entrepreneurial side of it. Like during that time, we ended up my business partner of 40 something years now. Our first one, I think, was the Christmas tree lot, which is not going to be a thing down in Dallas, Fort Worth necessarily, but up in Canada, if the right location, very lucrative.
Well, and you mentioned Christmas trees, and,
Okay.
and it is that's something that usually here in the Dallas Fort Worth area, that's usually a side hustle that the Boy Scouts take on. Every
Yes.
corner the Boy Scouts set up and they sell their Christmas trees and all. The churches here, Halloween, they have pumpkin patches. And
Nice.
they raise money by with pumpkin. As I said earlier, I did it by shoveling snow in the winter and cutting grass in the summertime. And my best friend and I printed a neighborhood newspaper. It was 1 page. And we in those days we used something called a typewriter.
Yes, I remember.
And we would type it out and then mimeograph off the page. I think maybe we had about 35 customers in the neighborhood. And if I'm not mistaken, it was like 10 cents a week. But in those days, that was enough money to get you a bag of candy and entrance into the movie theater.
Yeah.
And we did that. And now that I have mentioned that, I'm sure that there are people that are watching and listening to us that are saying, yeah, I used to do this or that when I was a kid.
Yes.
And I'll bet that the vast majority of the people that are watching and listening to us have done something over the years in order to put a few more bucks in their pocket.
Yes.
Today, that's called a side hustle. And you started doing that. How old were you when you started with the Christmas tree lot?
Let's see. I would have been my early 20s at the time. So that was something that was, especially at that age and my financial circumstances at the time, and that was a huge endeavor. I mean, the trees were costing us 10 grand back then. And what
Wow.
happens is you order them back in October for them to be delivered the first week in December. And they're all offloaded. You're at this location. And by the way, this is a great example of location, location, location.
Yep.
And it was a perfect spot. It was in a high-end neighborhood within the property of a garden center that sold like these $300 wreaths that people were buying for above their garage and that type of thing. But at any rate, so the trees would be delivered, and then you sit there and you stare at them, and you're looking at this money, and like nobody's buying Christmas trees the first week in October, and you're thinking, is this the right move? But
Right.
eventually, as we got closer to the 25th, right, that last week, then they disappeared, and it was a lot of fun. But then it was about, I'm going to say probably about 8 years later, I moved to the West in a small ski town in the mountains, where it's more of a scenario that you described. It's the Boy Scouts selling them, it's the churches selling them, and they were selling them retail for less than I was buying them wholesale back in Ontario. So we left that business back east. It just didn't make sense anymore.
Yeah. It also, those were the days where even a young entrepreneur, you didn't really necessarily have to have a license
No.
to buy and sell goods. Look, I'm sitting here, my mind is just wandering because I'm remembering when I was a kid in the neighborhood too, how many kids had a lemonade stand in the summertime?
Yes.
And the neighbors, for 25 cents or something, you'd get a cup of lemonade. But when it was 90 degrees out, the neighbors would all come out and they'd buy it. There were also the ice cream vendors in town.
Yes.
That used to peddle ice cream out of a little bicycle type of thing.
Yes.
Those were all examples of entrepreneurship. Of the Yankee ingenuity to get out there and just, however, would you say that before anybody says, yeah, okay, I'm just going to just go out and do something, you should have some kind of a business plan. I mean, you certainly can't buy something for $5 and sell it for $4.
Right, exactly. Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. Yes, I'm a huge fan of business plans because what I find they do is they push you to think of aspects of the business that you wouldn't have thought of, particularly if you haven't been in business before. Whether that's, the cost of lending or the cost of product or shipping or whatever it is, there's going to be some aspect of it that in the past hasn't been in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And it's great to give it some thought to. And I just wanted to touch what you mentioned on the lemonade, because this is really key too for anybody thinking about getting into a side hustle. I had a fascinating episode on my podcast recently, Side Hustle Hero, Jonathan Shuett. And he runs a popcorn stand at a farmer's market every Saturday. And the guy is making a killing. Consider your cost of product, right?
Right.
Like pennies for the actual popcorn. He's selling it for $10 a bag. Okay, that's Canadian, so that's probably around $7 and something US, but still. And he said, there was another guy in the market because I was asking them, okay, how about people that fail? What are they doing wrong? And he said there was this one guy he's not there anymore, selling steak sandwiches for about $12. He said they were really good, but that's an expensive piece of meat that you're putting in there.
Right.
So I'm thinking like that piece of steak versus his popcorn. And so as an exercise for people, if they're thinking of a side hustle, the next time you're at a farmer's market, am I using the correct term for Dallas Fort Worth farmer's market, country market? Yeah.
Yep.
Next time you're walking around there, just consider, take a look at the vendors and consider, the cost of their product, what they need to get started. Give you another example. This same guy, he said, I flew down to Reno, which he said, by the way, one day selling popcorn paid for his whole Reno trip when he was down there. It's crazy. And you're paying, the other thing about farmers markets, and I love, and we can talk about this later, is it allows you to test a market at a minimum cost to you. Up here for that market, it was like $100 versus you having to sign a lease and committing to something for 3 to 5 years.
Right.
So I'm a huge fan of farmers markets. At any rate, so he's down in Lake Tahoe and he sees this guy selling snow cones. And he's like, it's frozen water and this guy's charging $8 and that is US.
Right. And he's put 25 cents worth of syrup over it to give it a flavor and all. And then,
Yes.
then there's an additional maybe upcharge for that.
Yes.
which is inflated five to 10 times. You're absolutely,
Yeah.
and you bring up the farmers markets. That in itself has grown as a side hustle for a lot of local farmers, because they'll
Yeah.
either do it on the roadside setup. They
Yes.
raise their own crops, so you eliminate that having to buy it wholesale and sell it retail. If you're growing it in your garden, you sell to the market, and what you take a little bit of it and you put it out on the road, and now you're making
Yes.
100% profit on the product that you're putting out there.
Yeah.
So, and again, that's all the math part of it is,
Yes.
you think a little bit about what you're going to do as your side hustle, in order to make the most profit out of what you're going to do. A good friend of mine, uh, when he was in college, he was an artist. He used to paint on oil and canvas, and
Mm.
even, we're seeing a lot of resurgence of people as they get older. They go through their careers, and either while they're still working or after they retire,
Yes.
go back to taking out the canvas and the oils and start to paint a little. And then you go to a community show and you sell your paintings, whether you're selling them for, 20, 50, 100, $500 or more. That's another example of a side hustle.
Yes, absolutely. And depending on what that craft is, there are so many platforms out there, and the biggest one being Etsy, where you sell your products through a platform like that. Yes, they're taking a cut, but suddenly now you've got the potential exposure to a global audience.
Yeah. And also, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than saying, okay, I'm going to start maybe a little gallery. So you go down and you sign a 5-year lease someplace, and you've got to keep the air conditioning going, the heating going, the
The
lights
taxes,
on. You have to have regular hours, and either you're there or you have to hire someone. So ka-ching, 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 the cost side keeps going up. And you say, okay, well, I'll just sell my paintings for $5,000 a piece. Oh, well, if you got a market for that, fine. But if you don't, you can't hope to sell
Yeah.
that one painting a month in order to pay your rent and overhead costs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in that case, too, you're better to partner with like an agent or an art gallery, if they like your work. And again, they're going to be taking a bigger cut, but at least you don't have all those expenses that you just described, Stuart.
So you become the financial part of it, and you hire somebody who knows the product end of it, and partner go together, and you make a success out of it. So you started with Christmas trees. What other kind of businesses did you get involved in, and were these well thought out plans before you started doing it?
One of my favorite businesses, and I'm still a fan of the industry today, is self-storage.
And that's everywhere in the country.
It is.
Everywhere.
Yes, the US had about 10 times per capita than Canada back when I got started. We're catching up, but still not as saturated as some of the pockets in the US. But what had happened was, and all this time, I'm traveling two career tracks, one in the personal development space as a speaker and trainer and author, and then the businesses on the side. And at one point, there was this weekend seminar that I was teaching called Wealth and Women, and very intensive, really high energy. It was a lot of fun. And part of that, in preparation for it, was studying and researching about passive income. So those would be income sources where it does require typically a lot of work from you in the beginning to get it up and going, established, but then it's passive. You're getting paid while you're sleeping, kind of thing. And back to your involvement. Anyway, there are, in addition to passive income investments, there's passive income businesses. So think of things like parking lot, car wash, automated laundromat, and self-storage. And the more I went down the rabbit hole of self-storage, I went, oh my God, this is perfect for me and my business partner. But there's quite a price tag on them. And I didn't know anybody in the self-storage industry. And I wouldn't mind sharing an analogy after I share this one for any side hustle or any goal that you go after. It's principles of which I ended up using the principles in order to connect with a person who I didn't know, but ended up becoming my mentor because he owned a string of self-storage properties in two major cities and basically said, I'll, teach you what you need to know kind of thing. And it was him opening up his businesses and staff actually that gave me the confidence to then go ahead. And I ended up purchasing a facility, was doing it for about 18 years. And that became quite full time because we were continuing to expand it. But one of the side hustles that I did out of that, we saw that there was a market building for kayaks. This was going back, I'm going to say 15 years ago, something like that, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And one of the things that I did, and again, this is the number crunching, this is looking at the costs. I didn't want to, obviously I wanted to keep my expenses down as much as possible. And so the storage facility was called 12 Mile Storage. And so I decided to name the kayak business 12 Mile Kayak because we were running it on the site of the self-storage facility. I had about 7.5 acres there, so I had room for it. So then I just used the existing staff. And when they answered the phone, it was, good afternoon, 12 Mile. And then based on the person's question, then they were either directed to somebody with the kayaks or the storage kind of thing. So I didn't need another phone line and that sort of thing. So that was a side hustle. And if I can throw in one more kind of teaching point in there.
Sure.
We were just doing sales. And I would have loved to someone to come along, and I did keep my eyes open for them. I did look, but never found them. Someone to come along who had the expertise to do kayak rentals and kayak lessons. And then pay me, I don't know, X number of dollars a boat per hour, per day, or whatever. And then they run that part of it as their own business. And so it would have been a real win-win. So the point of that is that if somebody's thinking of getting into something, maybe a seasonal boat rental or something like that, you don't necessarily have to buy the asset yourself. Maybe there's an existing business out there that you can add value to, put a few bucks in that person's pocket and utilize their assets.
Yeah, you become the marketing arm for the business in promoting. Well, now I'm thinking like I believe some of the people watching and listening are thinking, oh, great, yeah, these self-storage places are phenomenal, but the investment side of it, you got to have the land. If you buy an existing facility, yes, but if you're buying the land and you're going to build the facility, and is it going to have air conditioned and heated sections, and is it other places? Fine. There could be a lot of startup costs in order.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah. So for somebody that says I want to do something on the side, maybe the storage facility thing isn't a good way to start your side hustle. But if you rent a storage facility in that area, and maybe, and I've seen this happen at some of the storage facilities, they open up like one weekend out of the month, and it turns it into, I hate to use the word flea market, but people raise their doors in their storage facilities, and they've got their artwork, their antiques, their collectibles, and then they close it on Sunday when they leave, and they come back next month and they open up, and they can cover their costs and make a lot of extra money on the side.
Yes. Yeah, actually, we did that for a number of years. It started with, I wanted to do some sort of a customer appreciation event. Okay. And I was thinking, barbecue, so like what, but what would draw people out? Because we were about 15, 20-minute drive outside of town. So I needed to draw them out for something. And I didn't realize this, Stuart, but like there's a whole industry of like flea market people. Like it's like a cult out there. It's amazing. I had no idea until I started to promote this thing. We had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people through it. We would do it once every summer, and we did it as a fundraiser actually for a nonprofit next door to us. But it was super fun. And it gave the people the ability to do exactly what you just described, open up your unit and sell whatever you like.
Well, and what this is an offshoot. If you go back several generations, the traveling medicine shows. That's what the traveling carnivals and everything were all about. They would go from city to city, set up for a couple of days. They'd have rides. They'd sell food. They'd sell, collectibles, and that's how they made their money. And it was it was a win-win for the people and a win-win for those promoters. When the cost started to go up, or when government gets involved and says you have to have licenses and permits in order to do all of these things, then it gets a little bit muddied.
Yes.
But on the surface, that's why I say almost every town, especially when you get out of the downtown cities, very often you get into the suburban areas where they have these farmers markets on the weekend.
Yes.
Not
They're
not
great.
not only the price is good, but usually the fresh produce and vegetables that you get are so fresh because they were just picked today. They weren't raised across country and kept in a freezer or something and put out like we see in the supermarkets. And so a lot of people will say, I don't want to buy my vegetables in the store because I can go to a market and I can
Yes.
buy it for the same price, maybe even less, and get it just as fresh.
And I'm one of those people. I do the bulk, as much of that I can every week with our markets. I'm really blessed with that.
Yep.
Let me toss out because we were talking about self-storage, and that is, it takes dollars to get involved in. On my podcast, Side Hustle Hero, the variety of side hustles, it's just mind-boggling. Of course, a lot of online things, but everybody's not into online stuff. And one of the side hustles that I just love, and it really flies under the radar because it's not sexy, it's not out there, and that is picking up trash, picking up garbage around commercial and industrial facilities before they open in the morning. So in some of these industrial parks, you got pop cans and chip bags and like whatever else floating around. Well, you get the contract with this property owner or business owner to go in and do a cleanup in the morning. You're essentially getting paid to go for a walk.
Yeah.
And like startup costs are like under $100. So this guy out of Calgary that I interviewed for it, he brought that just to him doing it itself up to a 6-figure income. It started as a side hustle and grew it to full time. But then he really scaled it when he turned his attention to getting other people, and you kind of made reference this before, hiring people,
right,
getting other people to do the cleanup. And he just went out getting the contracts. And I was thinking that is so smart because there are a number of, say, senior people, retirees that still want to be doing something. And some of them are early risers, again, getting paid go for a walk. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah. At the beginning of the show, I mentioned to everyone about my good friend Irving Chung, who is the franchise business. And one of the franchises that he recommends for people that have a full-time job, they want to do something part-time, is pest control. He said, because pest control does not involve an awful lot of expense side. You have to have the chemicals and the proper equipment and all to dispense that. But you can spend your weekends making appointments and hire someone to drive their own vehicle, if you will, open up the trunk of the car, take it out, spray the property with the chemicals that are needed, make money. And you can do it from the convenience of your home on a part-time basis.
Yes.
And if it's successful, you get a second person with another vehicle and you expand it.
Yeah.
You were mentioning car washes. There happens to be a franchise out there that uses waterless car washing. It's spray.
Yes.
They spray the liquids on from a container in a car.
Okay.
Now stop and think. You find an office building and you walk in and you send out your flyers and you say, hey, while you're working during your shift, I will clean your car. When you come out, you got a clean car and you can go to one location. You don't have to run all over town to do it. And he said that, like you said, some people are making up to 6 figures by going to one location and washing cars a few days a week.
Oh, that's brilliant. You're making it so easy for the customer. Wow. I love that.
Yeah. And it's just a thought process. Podcasting has become a big side hustle. People do podcasts and you get sponsors and everything. You make a little extra money, and some people turn it into a big business, like the TED Talks and this kind of thing that's going on. Uh, you mentioned your website, and it's www.sidehustlehero.com. Visit it,
Correct.
folks. See some of the things that Joan is talking about. You can also go to joanposivy.com, another website, and get additional information. But if somebody's out there saying, "Yeah, I should try doing that," what's the first step to somebody that wants to turn a hobby or whatever into a side hustle?
I want to add into there a word of caution, because we've been talking a lot about a number of pretty simplistic side hustles, and they
Mhm.
are. However, when you're looking at some of these, particularly online, people make it sound so easy. Like you just put out your shingle and you're going to be retiring on your sailboat at the end of the month, especially with a lot of the online stuff. I mean, it's bizarre. And, podcast, you've got to be doing a lot of work to get to the revenue point.
Yes,
Um,
a lot of
you
preparation
are,
involved.
yeah. And you're doing we talked about like arts and crafts and that sort of thing. There's a lot of competition out there. It's not, you can do it. Of course you can do it, but be prepared to spend some time getting your name out, making the right connections. So that would be the first thing, is how much time and energy can you devote to it? And I would really encourage people to, once they've found that side hustle for them, is to make a commitment that you're going to stick with it long enough for it to be successful. There's something out there called shiny object syndrome. You start this side hustle and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be great. But when, the numbers don't pan out quickly, or you're not gaining the traction, or you come up against something that you haven't thought of and you don't know how to do it, it's so easy to back off. And then you see an ad somewhere about this other side hustle and you go, oh, how about that one? And
Right.
out of all I guess I'm about episode 85 now, something like that. So many of the side hustle heroes, I always ask them, what's your best tip for someone? So many of them said, stick with it. This one guy I had recently, he said, Joan, because he told me about all these other failed attempts he had. And he said, the truth is, if I had just stuck with any one of them, I bet you they would have worked. So you got to be aware there is going to be work involved, and be willing to stick it out.
Well,
it's so worth it though.
That's true of somebody that maybe it's not a side hustle, but it's your bread and butter. You set up a brick and mortar store, an operation. You can't just say, I'm gonna sell sweatshirts, hoodies. I'm gonna open up a little shop, and it's gonna have hoodies for all the sports teams and all that. It's not a new idea, but
right.
You're gonna do. You figure, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start that store, and then in 2 years I'm going to open a second and a third store, and then I'm going to find somebody who wants to come over and buy me out, and I'll retire.
Right.
It don't work that way. And like you said, you got to go in and say, where do I want to be in the first year, the second year, have a 5-year plan, even a 10-year plan.
Yes.
And then after 10 years, then maybe you say to yourself, I'm doing this right, or it ain't working and I better go in another direction.
I encourage people and coach people to do actually both those things, in the sense of the shorter term goals, like maybe that 1-year goal, but then also the big picture. Yep. Because when you're setting a goal, if the goal is big enough beyond what you've done before, which it should be, you're not going to know how to achieve it. And the way you think right now might be a possible path, probably isn't. It's probably this way. So you want to have those shorter term goals so that you can keep score, but keep the larger one, the further down the road as well, because that becomes almost like the guiding point. And do we have time for me to share that analogy with you that's going to tie into this point?
Sure.
Okay. I write about it in my book. I call it the orange analogy.
Tell everybody the name of your book and when you write it.
Sorry. The Way Success Works: How to Decide, Believe, and Begin to Live Your Best Life. So there's lots of examples there from my own life and a lot of young entrepreneurs, young adults that have done amazing things in terms of the results that they've got, but not amazing in how they did it. There's nothing that they did in there that you or I could not replicate. And that's what I love about it. And so the way success works includes the sort of the how-to. And one of the analogies that I share in there is that if you and I were to take an orange seed and dissect it and look at it using the latest and greatest technology or the most powerful microscope, we would never ever see a little orange tree in there. Because the orange tree doesn't really exist in there. But it's interesting, if we were to plant that seed in the ground, the only thing that you and I would expect that orange seed to grow into is an orange tree, not a maple tree or a cherry tree or anything else. But the orange tree isn't in there. But what it does contain is a pattern plant or a nucleus that dictates what it can grow into. That seed is part of nature. You and I are part of nature and operate under the exact same laws, universal laws. But you know what makes us different, Stuart? We can grow into anything that we want to. So when we decide on a goal, and I'm not talking about, like, this is past the point of like thinking about it and talking about it and deciding. When when we actually decide and say, I'm going to go after this, that's like choosing the seed. Right. And then, like any seed, you need to plant it and care for it and nurture it in order for it to grow. And that's building that image of what it is that we want to grow into. And just like any seed, there's a gestation or an incubation period. Same with the side hustle. It's going to take time for things to start manifesting. And so you plant an orange seed or a carrot seed or anything, a week later, you think, well, where is it? Where's the results? Where are your sales? Oh, that's not going to work.
Right.
And then what you've done though, is change the picture. You've had this big, beautiful, bold image of your goal. And now you're worried, doubt, and you've changed the picture, and it's like uprooting that seed. And now you're growing into another goal, which is not good. So we got to stay the course. And the more we study this and our potential on the power of our thoughts, the more we will guard our thoughts.
And I think it's fair to say too that you have an advantage over a lot of people, that you have a background in the financial industry. And if you have a plan for going into a side hustle that is more than lemonade stands on the corner, you should sit down with a financial planner to say, what are the ups and downs? Do I need the seed money? Do I have enough in my pocket to open up this side hustle? Or do I need the help of a financial planner that's going to back me? Everybody would love to be able to have a rich uncle that says, sure, I'll give you the money that you need to start your business.
Sure.
But if you have to go back to the uncle and ask for more, it's going to be a short period of time before the uncle says, I'm tapped out.
Right.
So, that's where it goes back to this, having a good financial plan, even before you turn that little card around from closed to open.
And keeping in your mind's eye a picture of the goal already achieved, like from the moment you start, and then you come back to like today mentally, you can see the gap between where you are now and where you want to be. So in order to get there, I got to be more educating myself in the area of finances, as an example. I mentioned to you that I knew nobody in self-storage, really didn't know anything about it, but built an image in my mind of owning a facility. And lo and behold, I end up at this party and was introduced to a friend of a friend who was the person that ended up being the mentor. So build the image, and it's amazing what you'll connect with, what you'll attract to get there. But you got to take action. That's a huge piece. And
you also alluded to networking.
Yes.
Talk to other people and find out, because there's often a lot of ideas out there that in a group setting, that ideas that you say, oh yeah, I can do that. But it's got to be the right fit. Not every glove fits every hand.
Correct.
I know that you have also gone into your wholesale flowers. You did a business like that, and where did you get the idea for that?
It was actually myself. That's actually another good teaching point. There was myself and two other business partners that we were basically scouring looking for ideas. And we came across an ad that this company was selling franchises.
Okay.
And I think the franchise fee, I seem to remember it was like 20 grand or something like that. And we didn't have 20 grand. And a lot of people at that point would say, well, I really want to do this, but I can't because I don't have the money.
Right.
Well, coming up with the money is just one method. And as we ended up talking to these guys, we found out that they required a lot of the skill set that we had, a lot of it on the writing their training manuals, sales training, all sorts of stuff. And so we did a deal with them that we basically got the franchise at zero cost, but provided these services to them.
Yeah.
And I love the business, but I much prefer something like self-storage or even what you and I are doing now. I can be anywhere in the world and will be shortly. Whereas something like the flower business, I also owned a delicatessen, bought it as a turnaround project and really enjoyed that. But both with the flower business and the deli, you're dealing with the perishable.
Exactly.
You've got like 2 or 3 days to do something, whereas the storage, I build a building and rent it for 40 years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The floral business, they say after Mother's Day gets a little soft.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm going to share another one with the audience, something that my wife and I both got involved in, and that is we work for the city where we live. They have a convention bureau, and what they do is they have these, expos. They have, groups that come into town, go into a local hotel, rent out the conference space and and they need extra help at registration or with passing out goodie bags or whatever. And we signed on with the city. And when the city has an event, what they do is they just email us and they say, we've got these 3 events coming up in the next few weeks. Here's the hours, how many people we need. And you pick and choose what hours you want. You don't have to be there Monday through Friday on a set.
Right. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And it's good side money. You work anywhere from an 8-hour day to maybe a 3-hour day.
Right.
And you meet great people, and most folks just reach out to your local city and say, is there opportunities for part-time work within the city? And it could be taking tickets at the local park on a weekend or so. Joan, would you say that it was COVID that helped spawn a lot of the side hustle business because everything basically shut down due to the pandemic, and so people had to reinvent the wheel for themselves in order to have money to put food on the table?
That was certainly part of it, and the economic the economic factor of that has certainly been a driver, even more so the last couple of years, with the cost of everything going up, inflation. More and more people are looking at those side hustles. So that's definitely part of it. The other key part is with COVID and people being indoors, technology like Zoom, for example, really went through the roof. So it made a lot of things more accessible for people. And this increase too in the available platforms. Like there's a platform out there for pretty much anything that you want to do. One lady I interviewed recently, she loves dogs. She absolutely loves them. She lives in a building, they don't allow dogs. And her partner's a little bit allergic. But she is a pet sitter on a platform called rover.com.
My daughter is too.
Really? Okay. And so, but she goes into other people's houses to take them for walks and that sort of stuff. And get this, she is working full time as a social media person. And so it really doesn't matter where she is. And so part of her pet sitting gigs is she'll go and stay in that person's house for like a week when they're away. And she's getting paid from 2 sources. One is she's working away her 9 to 5 doing the marketing and then taking the dog out. It's great.
Do you know my daughter? That's her life. She
really.
Yeah, she works from home virtually and all. And what she does is, and she basically has two dogs, and the people go out of town every so often. She either picks up the dog or they drop the dog off at her condo,
Okay.
give her a little bag with the toys and everything.
Yeah.
And she has a dog for a weekend. She's like a foster parent
Yes.
for the weekend, takes care of the dogs, gets nice money on the side, but it doesn't affect her work. And while she's working, she just has to free up one hand every once in a while to scratch a tummy here to keep going.
Absolutely.
Uh, but these
Fun.
are good examples of side hustles. Another one I have been doing for years, and that is I go online almost usually 2 to 3 days a week, and I fill out surveys.
I
I
was going to mention that one to you. Yes.
I belong to it. You don't get money, but what you do is you accumulate points, and then when you accumulate so many points, you get a gift card to my favorite happens to be CVS, because when I go to buy my toiletries or whatever I need at CVS, I can give them a gift card for $25. I got it simply by answering questions on a survey. And it takes a few months to accumulate the points, but it's a great part-time gig that you do whenever you want to do it.
Yes.
It
You
doesn't,
set you
you
set
don't
your
have
own
to
hours,
punch a
and
clock. Right.
I was thinking about that when you mentioned the convention center work.
Yeah.
Like that gig would be perfect for someone who it gives you the hours of flexibility, but somebody that's like outgoing and really enjoys people. But for those who that's not their personality and that's the last thing they want to do,
Yeah.
something like filling out the surveys is perfect.
Yeah. And with working with a lot of these conventions, they need people at 7 o'clock in the morning. Now there's a lot of people that are night people and they
Right.
can't get up that early in the morning. But there's other people like me. I'm up at the crack of dawn anyway, and I can go over work from 7 to noon. I collect 5 hours worth of pay and all meet people, get in the car, go home. I haven't had to invest anything more than a gallon of gas or something to get there and back.
Yeah. Yeah. So take a look at a side hustle that's going to match your lifestyle, your preferences, what you could really dig your teeth into.
And as you said earlier, interact with other people that are doing it to see if it's something that you might also enjoy doing, or just talk to other people and say, I got this idea to do this. You talked about planting the orange tree. Well, yeah, it might take a few years for the tree to get mature enough to start bearing fruit, but you could put a tomato garden in your backyard, and you got tomatoes, for several months out of the year. You put them in a little container, and you can sell those tomatoes. There's really no limitations to what people can do in order to make money on the side. If there was a bit of advice that I think from both myself and Joan, make sure it's something that you would enjoy doing, because if it becomes a tedious task and you're not enjoying what you're doing, it's probably really isn't worth pursuing. And that's why you said earlier, there's so many people that drop out before they really have realized their potential.
Yes. And like doing this podcast with you right now is a perfect example of this. Is this work? Well, technically, but it's like I'm having a blast talking to you. So,
Exactly. And we're recording now, it's going to air, and then it can be paid forward because people can share it and they can push it forward, and other people can watch it at their convenience and learn a little bit about what we're talking about. And what we are talking about is visiting joanposivy.com, and you can get a lot of information. You can find out more about the way success works, her book, and it's fascinating to spend a little bit of time with somebody like you, Joan, in sharing your passion, your expertise, your knowledge, and all with a broad-based audience like mine, who I'm sure somebody is getting something out of this conversation and saying, you know what? I've always wanted to pick up those paintbrushes and start creating again. And I think that this was the kick in the butt that I needed.
and today's the perfect day to turn one day into day one.
That's right. That's right. It's like putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. Stop talking about it. Stop researching.
Yeah.
Start executing.
Well, Joan, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today and with my audience. I always close my shows with a quote be yourself because everyone else is already taken. And if you're somebody that wants to get into side hustling, that's a pretty good quote to follow, I
For
would
sure.
say. So thank you again, folks. That'll do it for another edition of Someone You Should Know. Go out and make it a good day. And again, thank you to Someone You Should Know, Joan Posivy. Thanks, Joan.
Thank you, Stuart.
Someone You Should